so I started traveling with Alex. And there's something that Alex brought into my journey and into my life that is one of my big takeaways, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Alex would always ask me the question about anything, what do you think it means? For example, I was riding a motorcycle in Nepal during my trip, and I crashed in Kathmandu, broke my foot, my wrists, I was on crutches. A day before I had to get on a plane to fly to London to be my brother's wedding. So I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Like, Jesus, the day before my flight, and I was suffering, right? And I was complaining and I was negative. And Alex would just look at me and say, what do you think it means? What do you mean, what do you think it means? Like, I got in an accident, it sucks. And he's like, well, yeah, but like, why do you think it happened? And I was like, and Alex would do this all the time. He just asked him, why do you think that? What meaning do you think it might be in it? And it was such a simple question that he asked all the time. But what he was actually doing is he was training me to create meaning, to find meaning and to create meaning. And I couldn't come up with a good answer to this. And he was like, well, let me tell you what I think from the outside looking in. He's like, you've been on this journey. It's become very spiritual. You've been living like a monk. And now all of a sudden you got to get on a plane and fly to London for your brother's wedding, and you've been talking about how nervous you are about going straight back into society, like bachelor parties. Like, I was so far removed from that world, and I had gotten to a place spiritual, and I really wanted to maintain where I was, my state, and so I was really nervous about going back. And he was like, well, it seems to me that the universe, and this is how Alex talks, the universe is handicapping you, so that when you fly back, you can't go out and participate in all these things, but you need to sit in his apartment sometimes and not participate so that you can maintain this center that you've created. And, you know, I smiled, and I said, yeah, that's going to be my meaning. And that became my meaning. That's why that happened. And what's the lesson here? The lesson that I learned, and it was very profound, and this is something that I've brought back in spades, is that normally we want to look for meaning, right? I can't find any meaning in my job, so I'm going to go find another job that maybe is more meaningful. Or I can't find any meaning in this relationship, so I'm going to go look for meaning elsewhere. We're looking to the world to give us meaning. Like, please, like, give me meaning somewhere. And what Alex helped me do was actually turn that upside down and say, no, look for meaning. You create meaning. You create it, or you don't create it. No matter what happens, you have the freedom to create meaning. Right? That was a big element of freedom. Whatever happens, whatever your job is now, you hate it, it sucks, whatever, there's a death in the family, you can create meaning. What do you think it means? And if you can train yourself to create meaning with whatever happens, you're untouchable. I'll give you a couple examples and how I've used this. I had a good friend from the U.S. who, while I was traveling, was talking to me on Facebook saying he was living in Alabama in the U.S. and he just met this girl, crazy about her, head over heels, and he moved all the way across the country to be with her. And 2 weeks later, she broke up with him. Okay? Now, where he was before he moved, he hated it. He had been stuck there for years. He didn't have good friends. He felt off, blah, blah, blah. When he moved to this new place where she was living, he loved it. He felt alive. And he had shared this with me. So now they've broken up and he's miserable. And he really was struggling with it. He couldn't get over it. And so he's like, man, Ryan, can you just help me figure something out. Like, this is killing me. I can't sleep, can't eat. And I thought of Alex, and I said, what do you think it means? And he's like, oh, don't come with your Buddhist crap. Jesus, everything's got meaning. You know? And I said, okay, here's how I see it. I was thinking about it. Where were you before you moved to Florida? He's like, I was in Alabama. And I said, how did you like Alabama? Were you happy there? He said, no, I hate it. I said, okay. How do you like Florida? He's like, I love it. Why did you move to Florida? what was the trigger to get you out of Alabama and to bring you to Florida? And he was like, oh, Allison. And I was like, so thank her. That's the meaning here. She got you out of a horrible place. She got you to Florida, right? And that was it. That was the meaning in your relationship with her. And if you look through her eyes, I'm sure that she could find meaning in why she met him. And immediately, he was free. He's like, oh my God, you're right. And all of that suffering just disappeared. Literally, just like that. And so how can you guys kind of think about this? I'll share with you a mathematical equation. I think that this is one of, if not the most powerful equation, as close to enlightenment as one could hope. Okay? That's a big promise, isn't it? Despair equals suffering minus meaning. Despair equals suffering minus meaning. Do you get it? Why do people feel despair? Because they have suffering. Suffering is a 10, and meaning is a 0. So despair is a 10. Suffering is a 10. You create meaning, that's a 10, and you're even keel. Suffering is a 10. Create meaning, that's a 20. And you are enlightened. No, but I'm not exaggerating. I think that if you just ask I've just found that you can train yourself. Just ask yourself, whatever happens, whatever your condition, your situation now, like, what's the meaning here? Find something and create it. Have that be your meaning. And you'll find that all the negative and the suffering disappears. So the freedom to create meaning is one of the biggest takeaways from my trip. I want to share one more story. Finally going to go to Vietnam, first time to Vietnam, super excited. Bought a new lens for my camera, had saved up for it, bought a new laptop, bought my ticket, flew into Ho Chi Minh City. On the very first night I'm there, I was robbed. Everything that I owned was stolen. Everything.
So what do you think it means?
Good. I've been asking myself that question for 5 years. Fly in literally day one while I'm sleeping. Someone comes into the window. Everything's gone. I was wearing one of those pouches under your shirt where you put your passport and your credit cards and stuff like that. In the middle of the night, this is killer. It was pinching me every time I rolled over. So I took it off at like 3 a.m. and I put it in my bag. And then when I woke up, my bag was gone. So this is me like sitting up in the morning. Everything's gone. Everything. I had shorts and a shirt, and that was it. No money, no passport, camera's gone, phone's gone, everything. And I remember sitting there like this and being like, I'm doing the calculation in my head, like, how I'm gonna get out of this. I'm like, wow, this is really bad. Like, oh, passport, no money, no, ooh, yeah, this is bad. And I went like this, and I'd fallen asleep with a book in my pocket. I'm a big reader. And this is literally the only thing I had on me. I took out the book, and it was Descartes. Descartes' Meditations. And I opened up the book to the page that I was on. And would you believe, the page I was on, Descartes, in 1564, is talking about how possessions own us, and how there are ways of the universe that are outside of our understanding. Talking about possessions own us, and to ever achieve real freedom, we have to do two things. One, at some point in our life, we have to doubt everything. At one point in our life, we have to doubt everything. And two is we have to be careful about possessions owning us. And to have less is to have. I'm not kidding. I'm like, is this a joke? Like the universe has a sense of humor. And so I went to the embassy, which one does in a time of need. And the security guy was like, you can't go in there, that's for Americans. I'm like, I'm American. And he was like, well, prove it. And I was like, oh shit, don't I look American? And so he actually wouldn't let me into the embassy. And he was like, oh, you need to go to the police and you need to get them to write a letter, and the police don't speak English. I have to find somebody to translate, take me over to the police station. And keep in mind, like, everything's gone, so I'm like shattered. And I'm having to do all of this side work. We get the police to sign the thing. We walk out of the police office station on the way back to the embassy. A monsoon comes through. Just torrential downpour, smears everything on the letter. I'm literally standing in a downpour. I've never seen rain like this before in my life. In Ho Chi Minh, with this piece of paper, like ink dribbling off, and I'm just like, what did I do to you? So finally I get into the embassy. I'm like, everything was stolen. I need a passport. And they're like, great, that'll be $100 US. I was like, no, like, I don't have anything. And she was like, what? Like, it's $100 US, so need to get a passport. I was like, you're in the embassy. Why are you here? You can't, like, what? This is useless. So then I went back to where I was staying. I called my father and asked if he could wire me money. And so I went to pick up the money that he wired. And guess what you need to pick up money? You need a passport. You need a passport to pick up money. And I'm sitting there like, yes, I've got money wired in. Yep, that's me. Yep, you can just hand it over. And they're like, yeah, let me just see your passport. And I'm like, oh. So I need money to get the passport. I need the passport to get the money. I'm like, am I the only one to ever stumble upon this gap in the world? And so I was out of luck. So for 3 weeks, I traveled in Vietnam with nothing. I was stealing bread off the back of street carts in the street. I was sleeping on beaches. I found one family that took me in for like 2 nights. But I lived homeless with 0 possessions aside from my Descartes for 3 years.
Wow, that didn't get sold.
But did not. No one was interested in my Descartes. They never are, you know? The real money's in it.
Okay.
And so what does this have to do with freedom? Those first few days, what was my state? I was angry, I was in disbelief, I was thinking about all the money I lost, I was thinking about the future, frustrated, irritated, right? At some point over the course of those 3 weeks, I came to a very profound realization. After waking up and being miserable and suffering every single day, here I am, like waking up on a beach, which isn't horrible, actually. I came to this profound realization that I actually have the freedom to change my response to what's happening, if I want. Very profound realization. I can choose how I respond to what's happening right now. And I really played around with that. And I found a way to get myself into a state of mind where I was neutral. I wasn't suffering anymore, I wasn't angry, I was neutral. But as the trip progressed and I started to cruise into this homeless, have nothing, there's nothing left to rob me of, I'm as liberated as can be, I started thinking differently about possessions. I really did, and I still do to this day. Like how much you really need. Wow, God, with nothing, you're okay with nothing. And there were a number of insights and perspective and clarity that came from that journey, that by the end of it, the response to what had happened was a positive one. So I had uncovered the freedom to choose how I respond to what happens, and then I had practiced the freedom to choose a positive response. When it first happened, everything was robbed, I decided that this was bad. And this is what we do all the time. We know everything, we just decide that what just happened today is a bad thing. I got fired, it's bad. You know, I got divorced, it's bad. This person passed away, it's bad, I'm gonna suffer. But whereas we don't know. Yeah, it looks bad from our perspective, but is it really? You know, is there not meaning in these things? Is there not something that we can take away? And practicing that freedom to choose whatever happens in life is one of the most powerful things I took away from my trip, and that I still hold on to today. And now, as a result, when I see other people suffering, I see that they're choosing to suffer, really. I mean, it sounds harsh, but they are. We are not victims of life, you know? Things don't just happen and we're just victims. We have the freedom to choose how we respond. We have the freedom to choose whether or not we're going to create meaning or not. So create meaning and choose a positive response. And we have to move out of this victim mentality that life happens to us and that we expect something from life. You know, give us meaning, give us the events that we want to happen. When really it's us that owns the responsibility. And that's a big and a difficult realization. No, you choose. If you're suffering, it's because you're missing something. You're not seeing meaning. So that I think was something that I've been able to bring back. So those are two stories. There's a lot of stories, but those are two I wanted to highlight because I think if I really try to point my finger at, okay, what did I get out of this journey? I think those are the two things that tie into freedom, and that you know, I continue to practice on a day-to-day basis. And what you find is, if you can really keep yourself in that state of mind, you're untouchable. It doesn't matter your situation. You can find meaning in things that happen, and if you can practice the freedom to choose a response, bring it on, life. Whatever you want to throw at me, right? I'll find meaning in it, right? And I'll choose a response. And I think that is one of the greatest freedoms that we actually have. But we usually don't. We don't use it. We don't use it. So those are my two big stories. I'd love to get some.
So,
I've been like talking for so long. I'd love to
So-
get like some interaction.
So what's it like coming back to work and, you know, I mean, that was a question that some people had,
Yeah.
you know, like, you find it, you know, difficult to continue being in that state in, you know, like now coming back to your work and roles and expectations.
Yes, it is. It's not easy. I think, has anyone heard of Joseph Campbell? Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey, which is, as he describes it, when you feel that there's a part of your being that's missing, and you go on a journey to find it. You find the jewel, and then you bring it back. And Joseph Campbell believes that we all have to go on this journey. It doesn't physically need to be like a journey of going and coming back. It was for me, but I think it can be very much a psychological journey. And he always talks about the return as the hardest part, by far. He talks about how easy it is to not return and to just stay in that, whether it's a state of mind or whether it's travel, right? Just stay there. And it was hard. It really was hard thinking about coming back because you're in such an open state and you start thinking about coming back into all the restrictions. The two things that I just mentioned right now have helped me tremendously. So the very first thing I did was when I came back and found a job was, okay, what is the meaning in this job for me right now? I need to create that meaning and I need to write it down. And every day when I wake up, if I'm feeling like, what am I doing here, whatever, look at that list and remember why I'm in this. And one of those meanings was to bring back some of the insights from my trip and share it with society, you know. And I created a list of 7 things that, being back here now, what meaning it has. But it's an ongoing challenge. When you are thrown into the 9 to 5 again, I think you get kind of rattled up. I think what's helped me kind of maintain my state is space, creating space, always having a space where you can go back and realign with that inner state, whatever that is. For some people, meditation is a great way to kind of go back and tap back into that world. Sometimes it's just taking lots of breaks throughout the day. Sometimes it's remembering what the meaning is. So I think you can pull on these different levers to help you maintain the perspective that you had when you were traveling, and to try to help you maintain also that state when you were traveling. Not easy, but I think having the ability to create space and being able to pull some of these levers helps. The good thing about writing out that meaning is that really becomes your goals. And this was a really interesting shift for me because when I was in the corporate world, all of my goals had to do with the goals that society tells you are supposed to be your goals, like make more money, like overachieve on your revenue target, like get promoted, all these types of goals. And now, coming back, when I look at my goals, it's stuff like, you know, have a positive influence on your team members. Like share the insightful life experiences that you have. It's like, I don't even, like the revenue and the business is not even on my, at all. It's not even in the universe of that. And so, you know, talking about what really changed, when I saw that, I was like, wow. The reason for me coming back is completely different, and the reason for me going into work every single day today is so different than what it was before. And actually, what gets me up and going in the morning every day has nothing to do with the job itself. It has to do with the people and the impact that I can make and having the community and the sharing aspect of it. So that has been a radical shift for me.
Yes, because you share with us the motivation for you to choose to go to voice. You can hear a voice in your heart, and you can feel there is something more. So after the journey, can you still feel the voice, or are you satisfied?
Yes, I can still hear it. I see it as when I took the jump, essentially, and Joseph Campbell, in the way that he talks about the hero's journey, he talks about taking the jump as answering the call. Right? So I answered the call, finally. The phone had been ringing and ringing and ringing, I answered the call. And what happened when I did that, just looking back, and for me to try to explain it to you, is I opened up a line of communication to what do you want to call it? Universe, to the universe, to God, to a different source, whatever you want to call it. I opened up a line of communication to that something. By taking the plunge, I said, okay, I'm in it. Like, let's start a discussion. Let's start a relationship. And that, like any relationship, if I'm talking to Julia, if she's never listening to what I'm saying, at some point I'm going to stop talking. And so that's what happens. When there's a voice and you're kind of aware of it, but you're just too busy to, at some point it's just going to stop. But when you respond, when she turns to response, now all of a sudden I'm actually going to share more with her. And I feel like that's what really happened on my journey, is that the voice got louder, it got more clear, and then all of a sudden I noticed you know, what we would call synchronicity, right? We're really kind of in a flow. You meet the right people at the right time, and the right opportunities are just laying down in front of you, and it's just effortless. You're just kind of walking this path. So hopefully that answers your question, but yes, I think my relationship with that something has gotten stronger over time.
We can be much more sure about the meaning we created for the bigger things, for example, the job or the study. But I feel, how can you be sure about the meaning you created for the little things? Because if you are not sure, you are not convinced, then you may tell yourself, I'm cheating myself.
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple of things. I think there is no cheating yourself. There's no, I'm creating meaning for something that doesn't have meaning. It's a choice. I mean, how small, no matter how small or how big, create meaning or don't. And there's no right answer. Both are fine. But I think you'll experience life in a very different way if you get in the habit of creating meaning. And there may be some things where you don't feel the need to create meaning. And that's fine. Do I need to create meaning for why there are twigs stacked over this light? No, I don't. I'm completely neutral about that. And I'm positive. I think it's very nice. But take, for example, traffic. Let's say you're sitting in traffic and you're frustrated about the traffic. Right? If you can just be aware of the fact that, why am I so frustrated about the traffic? Create meaning in the traffic. I've done that before. I give you an example. I said, okay, the meaning here is to test me on my mindfulness and my ability to choose responses, right? So this is this is a great opportunity while I'm sitting here in traffic and everyone's honking at me. This is a great opportunity for me to practice what I've developed in meditation and to see if I can get into a new place. What, right? Create the meaning in the traffic. So I think the more you get in the habit of just ask yourself the question. That's what Alex did for me. What's the meaning? Hey, maybe you don't come up with something the first time. That's fine. Ask yourself again, what's the meaning here? Just play the what's the meaning game. And I think over time you'll see that you do have the freedom to create the meaning. And the more you create the meaning, the more confident you are where you don't start to doubt it. Because you know that you are able to create it or to not.
But I think a certain responsibility comes with that as well. I mean, you created the meaning, and whatever comes out of that is, it's just like, hey, I created the meaning and it led me here.
Other questions?
I'm interested in, after you lost everything and you slept on the beach and for how long? 3 weeks?
3 weeks, yeah.
3 weeks? Okay. Like what was running through your head, every day, every single moment, and
It changed.
just like detaching from the whole whatever happened.
What was going through my head every day changed as I moved through those 3 phases. First it was just every day like, type of, oh God, what am I gonna do? And I gotta find a way to get to somewhere and to get some help and to get some money and I gotta find a place to stay. And then I got to a place where, I was able to choose a neutral response and I was okay with it. But then I got to a place where I started seeing all this meaning, like, wow, I'm really learning what possessions means, and to have all of that taken away, I'm gaining amazing perspective right now. And so every day when I woke up, I was animated. I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like I just woke up on a beach, this security guard is like shaking me. And he's like, sir, you can't sleep here. I'm like, okay. And I'm just walking down the beach and I'm laughing. Like this is so ridiculous. Like what a story this is gonna make someday. And what amazing potential there is for perspective. So I think I got to a place where I was just accepting it all. And I remember walking down the street and these Vietnamese guys like waving me into this like noisy, boisterous bar. And I just like walked right in and they like, put their arms around me and sat me down, and none of them spoke English. I was in Da Nang, central Vietnam, and they just started pouring things in front of me. And I just hung out with them for like 3 hours. They became like brothers. And I just like walked out. Went back to the beach and laid down in the sand. I don't know. I tried to take it for what it was.
Yeah.
And looking back on it now, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me by far, the perspective that I gained. And so that's why, I think that we make the mistake of constantly judging things as it's good or bad, it's good, this is bad. Just experience it and look at it from as many different perspectives as you can. Give it time. You're going to feel different about it today than you are a year from now, and 3 years from now, and 5 years from now. And that bad thing that you saw may turn out to be, as you gain perspective and vantage point, you may be able to see that, wow, actually, all this time I had it wrong. That getting fired on that day was the absolute best thing that ever could have happened to me. And I think being able to practice that perspective, Nietzsche says something I think is very powerful. He says, there's a height of the soul from which even tragedy ceases to look tragic. And that really strikes a chord with me. There's a perspective, is how I see it. There's a perspective. Whatever happens, there's a perspective where it doesn't look tragic or bad anymore. It just is, and it fits into a larger picture.
So how did you get your passport and the money?
Oh. That story, people have demanded me to write a book just on that. You actually can't.
Really?
I've given you 2% of that story. Maybe 5% of that story. Right? Maybe 5%. I was cursed. That's not the only bad thing that happened. I was cursed for like 3 months that actually lasted. I got out of Vietnam eventually, but it didn't stop then. one bad thing after another just continued to happen, to the point where you can't help but start to ask, like, what is going on? Okay, there's really some meaning here. This is not like by accident. Like, either I've done something horrible or someone's trying to teach me something. But it worked itself out. I'm still living, breathing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got your camera back.
That's a new camera. Some guy in Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh right now is taking wonderful pictures with my own camera. At least I hope.
I have a question. From what you've told us, I feel like when something happens to you and you create a meaning to it, somehow it becomes easier to come to terms with whatever's happened to you. Question number one, how do you know it's the meaning? How do you accept it so that it stays with you? Because you got mugged and all, but it's more tragic things happen to people. People lose people and stuff like that.
Sure.
How do you then find the meaning in that situation and then stick to it and not doubt it?
Yeah. I mean, the second part is tough. The first is that, to your question, how do you know that it's the meaning? There is no the meaning. I think that's part of the point. You have the freedom to create the meaning. And yes, I think there are big tragedies that happen, and perhaps it's a little bit more difficult, or perhaps it takes a little bit more time to create meaning, but you can. And what I've started taking that a little bit further, and I've started creating meaning in advance. And so, for example, imagine the worst thing that could ever happen to you that would just completely destroy you. Like for me, it's losing a family member. And so I've started already thinking about what meaning would that have if that were to happen. So it doesn't mean that what happened was a good thing. It just means that what happened is not void of meaning, and that you can't create the meaning, and that really helps with the suffering process. But in terms of how do you get it to stick, I think it's like getting anything to stick. It's repetition. There's a training element to it. You just get in the habit of shifting your perspective around and looking at things from as many perspectives as you can. And I think the more that you do that, the more you'll find that it sticks. Anything else?
More of a comment than a question. It's like as you are sharing and you said you want to share your experience to other people and then you want to like do public speaking and all. So what I felt throughout your whole sharing was I got really, really drawn inside your story, and then that was very hard.
Not coming from me, it's just I'm part of the orchestra.
Public speaking is working.
Well, as Vaughn knows, my colleague, he just walked in. We're always up in front of people talking.
Hello,
Hi,
you're Ryan's friend.
friend and colleague, correct?
Oh.
Hopefully traveling very soon.
Yeah.
Actually, he's trying to get me back on the road. He has the travel bug that I had. And he's been telling me, are you ready yet? Are you ready yet? I'm like, man, I need a little more time. I think now we're looking at early October, we're gonna jump in somewhere.
Any ideas from the crowd, we're happy to take it.
He wants to like book something like tonight. Like, let's book a flight. Like, oh, I did this.
I have a question then, kind of along that.
Yeah.
How did you know you were ready to come back into the working world and to leave everything that you kind of discovered about yourself and the world around you?
Yeah. It's a great question. So what I've shared with these guys a little bit was why I went, and I think it's why I came back is the same reason, and that's the reason that I went was there was a voice inside me that got increasingly louder over time, even though I tried to ignore it for a few years. It got so loud and so clear that there was no other step I could take other than to go on that trip. And so, for the same reason, that voice, after about 12, 13 months, the voice started guiding me back, saying that, you've gained these insights, these experiences. You've been guided along this journey. Now you need to go back and share that message. You need to go back and be a part of the community and influence people and share what the experiences that you've been given. And so the voice, I think, is the quick answer. It's just that the more I created the space, a lot through meditation to kind of hear that voice, the more like that line of communication just became very, very clear. And I was able to hone that over the 15 months where I could literally like go in a room and just sit and just boom, all right, like I know exactly where I need to be and what I need to do. So it guided me back.
Dong-Yang?
Talking about voices, sometimes I feel that there are different voices inside me. So for example, one voice saying that I must be good at my job and be an influence in my job. But sometimes there's another voice saying that I want to maybe take on a journey like you did. So I don't know how to, I don't know which voice is true or which voice I need to follow. So that's my question.
Yeah. I think our beings in general are very complex, and each one of us is complex in different ways. You have to invest the time to really study yourself like you study a language, Carve out the space to really sit and spend time with those voices, with each of them, get to know them very well. And I think what you'll find is that you'll begin to differentiate. It's a great question. It's one that I get from a lot of friends, and something that I still always have to be careful about. But through practice, I've gotten to a point where I hear one voice saying like, go climb the corporate ladder, like make a lot of money and retire. And I hear another voice, and I know that they are different voices, and I know kind of how to differentiate them. So there's no quick, easy answer that I can give you other than you need to spend time with yourself, and you need to create a space in order to really study and get comfortable with the complexities that you have in order to make that differentiation.
I think just in the comment, earlier on I was asking whether sabbatical travel is like the only way to seek freedom. Personally, I don't think so, because not everyone has the resources. You probably just did a 15-month crash course. Perhaps another person who carves out a space, on a daily basis to meditate or whatever, would maybe take like 5 years, begin what you think. Yeah, that's my comment.
I think it's a great question. Okay, not all of us have the ability to just drop everything and go, right? Most people don't. As I mentioned, I've been on this journey of seeking understanding and perspective for my whole life. And it was only recently that I was actually able to take that plunge. And so I can certainly understand all the different other avenues that you can try to pursue in order to gain that perspective and that freedom. For me, I think you're exactly right. I think a trip like this is a packed-in version. It moves you farther along faster, right? Because you're able to invest all of your energy and all of your time into that practice, and you're really going to be able to push forward. Otherwise, it's always a matter of, I'd say two things about that. One is, maybe it's not possible to do something like this, maybe it is. I think one of the things that was really interesting as I traveled and met all kinds of people, travelers, locals, you meet people that are living their lives so different from anything you've ever seen that you're just like, what? You're traveling with your 4-year-old and you're backpacking and you're taking them to, it opens up your mind to possibilities and how much we just limit ourselves. Like, I could never do that. Like, I'd love to do that, but Jesus, that sounds, when you're exposed to people that are living life in very dynamic ways, you start to think, it's just a matter of sacrifice, really. Maybe someone wants to do something like this, but it's going to mean walking away from a job, or maybe it means walking away from a family, or maybe it means walking away from a loved one, or maybe it means spending all your savings, maybe it means ending your relationship, whatever, right? I mean, how bad would you want to go on something like this? So that's one thing I would say.
I think that would be the ultimate test of freedom.
I mean, look at the Buddha, right? Look at Siddhartha, right? Born to a king, wife, son, riches, no reason to go outside those castle gates. He walked away from all of it because there was a voice guiding him to do that, but also because what he got was more valuable than anything else. And so when people say that they can't do it, you can, but there are costs. There are costs that I paid. This wasn't just, a fun journey. There was emotional costs. There were relationship costs. There were occupational costs, right? And there are costs. But without doing something as extreme as that, you need to create the space. And whether you do that once a day, once a week, once a month, once a day, 3 times a day, it's going to move you along faster, right? I mean, it's like going to the gym, right? You want to get fit, you do 12 months intensive working out every single day for a year type of training, or you go to the gym once a month, or you go twice a day. I mean, how bad do you want it? What is it that you want? And then you need to build a strategy around how to get there.
I guess you'll never really know until you do it.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I met this girl who had been working at a bar for like 2 years, saving like $100 a month in order to take one flight to South America. I mean, there's a lot of creative ways. And to do something like this does not cost a lot of money. That's the other big misunderstanding about travel. It can, right? If you're staying at luxury 5-star resorts on the beach, right? Which is where I was staying. And I just wasn't, I didn't have a
You
room.
just need to sleep on the beach.
They were like, just let me sleep, Mr. Officer, just another hour. He was literally like kicking me out, and I walked down to the next resort and sleep on that. I'd get like an hour at a time. But depending on where you go, especially in this part of the world, geez, you go to Thailand. I had a room in Thailand. I was paying $35 a week with Wi-Fi, refrigerator. $35 a week. You want to stay there for a month? $100, $120, and you're paying $2 for a meal. I mean, there's lots of creative ways. There's this perception that traveling the world has to cost a ton of money, and it doesn't.
I have a question from Ray, who had to go off early, but what he wanted to find out was, about giving back to society. Was it a conscious choice that you made, or was it something that your voice inside told you to do?
Yeah.
What was it?
The
Was it-
latter. I'd like to say that it was me. It's like, the whole journey for me was a slow process of delegating to the voice, moving out of this sphere and moving into this one. And Joseph Campbell, I'm always quoting people, but he has another very, very powerful quote that fits in very well to the experience I had, which was, you need to be willing to walk away from the life you have planned in order to find the life that's waiting for you. And there's a certain element of belief there. And that's not where my head was when I went into the journey, but it was definitely there when I came out of the journey. So I think the second element, so that voice saying, here's your next move, and then handing it to me on the plate. I went on that journey with no real expectations and no real intellectual understanding of what was going to happen. And what I experienced and the profound insights that I feel I was given, I got to a point where I'm like, I got whatever it was I was looking for. And really for the first time in my life, I feel like I have some real tangible perspective and lessons that I can squeeze and exercise for the rest of my life. So I felt that what the journey was, the purpose of the journey had been fulfilled. The reason why the voice was telling me to jump was to collect all of those. And then the reason why the voice was telling me to come back was to bring it all back. And one thing I'd just like to share, maybe a final kind of big picture just thought for you guys, is that a big theme is this openness. And I wasn't open to a lot of the things that happened during my trip, before my trip, in terms of really following this voice and paying attention to coincidences and asking what the meaning is. And when I went on the trip, I said, okay, I'm just going to kind of open myself up. You know, I would hear people talk about the universe and energy and this stuff, and I'm always like, yeah, okay, maybe, that all sounds a bit. And it was because I hadn't experienced it. Right? I think so long as you don't have an experience of something, then you're just in here. You either believe it or you don't, right? That's belief. But then there's experience. And once you have experience, you don't need the belief anymore. I don't need to theorize about these things anymore because I had a real experience. And I believe that the only reason I had this experience was because I gave them a chance. I opened myself up wide enough to say, okay, let me give this a chance. And so with some of the things I've shared with you guys, that's my hope that you'll take away. It's just some of this may be new in terms of creating meaning or choosing response to whatever happens in life, but give it a chance. And I think that you'll see a response. And hopefully that will kickstart a relationship with you and it. I hate names, labels.
Yeah.
I try to stay away from them. Like, let's not put a name on it. Things people get all offended and confused when we use these words. So yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sure we could go on and on and on, and we can talk about, you have a really interesting topic. I mean, we were talking before this session, and Ryan was saying, yeah, there's all this thing about synchronicity, and I'm like, okay, great, there'll be another session. So
It's so
we're gonna
hard.
find a way to bring you back
It's
to
so
talk
hard
about
not.
synchronicity.
It's so hard not to talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, there were things like there was a period of time where like my thoughts were manifesting like right away, and I started having it all the time, and it was really freaking me out. I was sitting down in a cafe, and I was just, I know we're like way over time, but I was just thinking like, man, I really need to start meditating more. And in that second, a girl is sitting next to her husband, and she just looks up at him and she says, you should really start meditating. And I was like, shit. And he was like, I know. And I was like, okay, that was kind of weird. And then a few days later, I'm sitting at a place and I'm just thinking, like, wow, I haven't had any alcohol in like 6 months, and I was a big partier. It's like, wow, I feel great. I was, just paying attention to like the thoughts in my head. And literally, this like big table of like 8 women, they're like, and that girl Sally, she's always drinking too much. She's such a drunk. Like she needs to just walk away from alcohol. I'm just listening, like, whoa, what is going on? But this type of stuff just started happening like all the time. Like really, like I have a thought, and the world and what we see, there's a lot more, and we don't have to understand it, but just give it a chance. When coincidences happen, just take another look, see if you can pick up something, like a detective game. As I started to play that game, they started to happen more and more and more and more, and then I kind of got in that flow. And it's a fun game to play. It's like, wow, this is crazy. Like, let me try to think of something else and see if it happens. And, very strange.
But I think it really requires a person to have done some work on themselves, and really tapped into themselves for those things to happen. Versus just intending. Intending.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone can do that, right? But
$1 million, $1 million, $1 million.
Yeah.
There is no God. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So it really takes a journey. I think it takes a journey of working on yourself. And these things show up. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom from all your travels with us. And I just want to say that, in terms of like public speaking. I'm sure we're all inspired by the stories, the tall tales.
Tall tales.
Tall tales. And so thanks again, Ryan. Let's
Thank
give
you
him a
all.
hand.